Well, the autumn colours are well and truly here, and throughout the years they've inspired both artists and poets alike with their romantic hues. On today's Arts and Crafts programme, we're going to be looking at the work of Keith Frederick, who is a potter and artist who's been inspired by the earth and the autumn colours to produce a new 3D exhibition. Also, the month of November sees a poem, well at least a verse of a poem, being recited throughout the land, and we're going to have a complete reading of that poem. And that's all on the Arts and Crafts show.
Hello, and as well as pottery and poetry, we hear from Hockney in Los Angeles, and our music performance has an American feel as Anthony Bunting sings live here in the studio a track from his new album, inspired by the great Bob Dylan. But first, My Fair Lady has become a piece of classic musical theatre since it first opened in London in 1959. It keeps on breaking box office records. Ever since the original production with Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews, each and every revival sees the crowds flock to see Eliza Doolittle transformed from Cockney Sparrow to genteel lady. Well, the latest to take on this demanding role in the latest revival on tour at the moment is Catherine Mount. Hello, Catherine. Are you genteel or are you a Cockney Sparrow?
Well, take your pick. I can be either at any given time.
Well, I was hoping we'd have you singing and dancing here in the studio today.
Unfortunately not, no. I think I've been learning to project so much that would probably burst everybody's eardrums if I started now.
More importantly, if you want to see us sing, get yourselves a ticket and go down there. And so,
Quite.
What drew you to this part?
I think it's something actually which I've always longed to do ever since I was a child. You know, I mean, my parents do have memories of me dancing around the living room, you know, singing the songs from the show. So it really is something that was very dear to my heart anyway.
So, I mean, was it this particular role that you longed to play, or was it just musical theatre that you loved?
Oh, musical theatre in general, but this particular role, actually, ever since I saw the film, I've just been, in awe of
I mean, most
art.
of our viewers are going to recognise you from Emmerdale, and so it's going to be very strange seeing you. I mean, we're used to seeing you sort of on a farm with cows and sheep and so on, and going from seeing you doing that to suddenly on stage is going to be a bit of a shock for people.
Something very different, yeah. And I have to say that the transition has been hard work for me. I mean, very enjoyable, but hard work too. It's obviously a very different skill.
How do you think the audience is going to cope? I mean, you've been playing a vet in Emmerdale for 3 years.
Yeah.
And from going to seeing you, I mean, we turn on the telly at night time and see you with your arm halfway up a cow, and you go from that to suddenly appearing on stage. It seems very strange. And did you ever try and get to sing and dance on Emmerdale?
No, there was never that opportunity for me, unfortunately. I don't think I was singing Dancing Vet. I don't know. They didn't really go for it.
So, I mean, is this a new branch of your career, and we're going to be heading off into new musicals for the rest of your life? And
I'm hoping so. Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, we'll see how the next 6 months goes.
So it's on tour now for about 6 months, and then hopefully into the West End. Is that right?
Yeah, very possibly. I mean, I'm taking it as it comes, but yes, yeah, there has been talk, so we'll see what happens.
So we need everybody out there getting tickets because we want to see you in the West End and
definitely
performing as the latest Andrew Lloyd Webber straight after that.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, send me my tickets.
Will do.
I desperately wish to come and see this.
Okay.
And so everybody head down now. The tour starts next week.
Yep.
Is that right? Yep. So head down and get your tickets now. Well, 3D art is the generic name given to not only sculpture but also pottery that stands apart from being just a utilitarian practical item. Keith Frederick has taken the potter's art to a new level, and his work will be on display next week at the Norton Wood Gallery in Evesham. Here is a taster of what will be on show.
Now, as you can see, some really exquisite pieces. Now, we're very fortunate that Keith Frederick has spared some time from setting up the exhibition to be with us here today. Keith, welcome to the Arts and Crafts Show.
It's a pleasure.
a real range here of different works of yours. Have you always been a sculptor, or is it something... How did you discover you could do this?
Well, it's always been a hobby of mine, but it wasn't until I combined it with what was my job, which was a gardener, that I came to realise, you know, that nobody had embraced the concept of, you know, in the same way that I am, of gardening and pottery.
Right, OK, so they're both very tactile.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah, very much.
OK, now let's have a look at some of these pieces. Now, this exhibition has all been inspired by autumn, but I'm finding it hard to see the connection here.
Well, I doubt if you would. This is, in actual fact, this figure is Kevinos, the Greek god of gardening.
Oh, right.
And the Greeks celebrated autumn in a very different way than we do, and they celebrated it a lot more. And this is the inspiration behind this piece.
Very classical. And this is quite a similar classical style.
Along the same lines,
Yeah, but
yes.
very much they look like, to me, like they should be in the garden.
Yes, it's designed for that.
Yeah. Now, this piece, very simple, very earthy piece. What inspired you?
Well, this, as you can see, there's a dragonfly on there. And unfortunately, this is the time of the year when all the beautiful insects, such as dragonflies, die, and it's regeneration, really, back into the earth. And next spring, they'll be up again.
Yeah.
And joining their fellows.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's very simple. This, though, is my favourite piece, very rustic piece. What's behind that?
Well, yeah, that's quite unique, really, because it's actually taken from a gardener, an old gardener friend of mine, who used to feed the birds in autumn because that's when they need feeding.
Yes.
And he used to bring a patch full of corn in
It
every
makes
day.
a lovely vase, really
Yes,
nice
beautiful.
vase. OK, now finally, let's have a look at this piece. Very, very bold colour. How has that been inspired by autumn?
Well, interesting. This is actually the colour, as I see it, of a typical autumn evening sunset, that really rich blue when you know there's going to be a frost the next day.
Yeah.
And I was trying to capture this sort of the coldness in the atmosphere.
No, it's very striking.
Yeah.
Please, thank you very much indeed for bringing these all along, and I hope the exhibition is a great success for you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
David Hockney. Famous all over the world for his imaginative paintings, he's especially renowned in his hometown of Bradford for designing the cover of the local telephone directory, of all things. Well, you may have read in today's papers that his sister Catherine Hockney has been asked by rival telecoms company Cable & Wireless to design the cover for the Evesham telephone directory. Well, she joins me, hopefully, on the phone from California. Catherine, are you there?
I am, Ross. Hi.
Hello there. Glad we can actually speak to you here. Catherine, glad you could join us. What is it? I mean, most artists have very strange requests, but a phone book. What on earth did you think when they phoned you up and asked you about this?
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for David, then I would have been particularly shocked. But obviously, there is a little bit of a similarity there between the project that he did. So, yeah, I thought maybe that's obviously where they've made the connection, although I hope I've got it on my own merits too.
So is there any sort of jealousy between yourself and David on this one?
Not yet, but then he hasn't seen the finished product.
There's no sort of rivalry of who gets the best town?
No.
And does Evesham win on that front?
Yeah, Evesham's a beautiful place, although I can say that quite happily sitting in LA.
Okay, well, can you possibly tell us what we're actually going to be expecting from this?
I'm afraid that my design itself is obviously top secret, and you'll have to wait a few months before you see that.
Well, when will that book be published? When can we all see it? When can we all see it?
I believe it's April next year. So,
Okay,
yeah.
I look forward to that and any other phone books that you happen to design. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Ross.
Now, back in the 1960s, Bob Dylan turned folk music on its head and created a new genre, protest music. Joan Baez, Tom Paxman and Joni Mitchell were all inspired by Bob, taking simple acoustic folk music and writing lyrics that express the anger and frustration of the times. Well, Anthony Bunting is keeping that tradition alive. He starts a new nationwide tour in a couple of weeks' time, bringing this type of music to a new generation of fans. And here he is live in the studio with Black Arrow's Bleeding Hearts.
throwing rocks out the window, stumble into the telephone pole while the light shines down on your person, filtering through all your aversion. Love will not find you tonight. You're preaching love, thinking love, holding back. What were you thinking when black arrows shot out your bleeding heart? Looking into the mirror, don't like what I see, ain't looking like me, and I wanna be near her. There's no way in hell, no time to tell. Love will not find you tonight. You're preaching love, thinking love, holding back. What were you thinking when black arrows shot out your bleeding heart?
Thanks a lot there, Anthony. Always a pleasure to have you on the programme. And fantastic number there. Who was that? Is that a cover version, Dale?
It is. It's one of the covers off my album. I've put 2 or 3 on there that I've sort of quite dear to my heart, that I've played for a few years now. That one is by a band called Whiskey Town. They're not very well known in the UK. They disbanded after a couple of albums, but really enjoy their stuff.
Well, speaking of bands, I'm used to seeing you with quite a few musicians behind you. Where have they all disappeared to?
I've given them a break.
They're all on holiday.
No, I'm actually, this album I've just written is most of it is my own stuff. It's mostly acoustic on my own with some accompaniment. I do have a few musicians that are coming out with me on this next tour. But mostly sort of bluegrass stuff, so it's going to be a violin, banjo, mandolin, that sort of thing.
Okay, and you're on tour at the moment?
Yeah, starting off in Bristol, working my way up north, coming back down south, so yeah.
Okay, so everybody get out there, see the tour, buy the CD, getting back to #1 there, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show again. Thanks a lot, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, early November sees remembrance services held all over the country for those that have died in the 2 world wars and in the conflicts since. Of most of them, a short poem, the first line of which is, "They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old," will be movingly read. But few know that this is in fact just one stanza of a 7-verse poem, For the Fallen, by Lawrence Binyon. Binyon, a curator at the British Museum at the time, wrote it in September 1914, shortly after the Great War had started, when the first of what were to become millions of casualties were starting to be reported back home. Now, here to read the entire poem for us are Catherine Mount and Keith Frederick, For the Fallen.
With proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children, England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirit of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free.
Solemn the drums thrill. Death august and royal sings sorrow up into immortal spheres. There is music in the midst of desolation, and a glory that shines upon our tears.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables at home. They have no lot in our labour of the daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam.
But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known as the stars are known to the night.
As the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end they remain.
Well, let's hope that everyone all over the world listens to those words over the next week or so. And now a roundup of what's new in the arts world. A photographic exhibition of how the Sistine Chapel was restored and the frescoes of Michelangelo brought back to life is on at the Phoenix Library. Beautiful close-up of quality photographs show all the masterly detail that Michelangelo miraculously created on the ceiling in the Vatican Chapel.
A touring production of Cats is halfway through its run. It has had rave reviews, so it does come your way. Do try and see it. It's in Thirsk for the rest of this week, Bristol next week, before moving to the Wimbledon Theatre in southwest London.
And of course, don't forget Catherine Mount's interpretation of Eliza Doolittle in the new production of My Fair Lady, which opens the week after next. And while we're on a musical note, Aled Jones is on his singing tour this week, Basingstoke, and next Saturday in Skegness.
The Royal Ballet are performing some of Sir Frederick Ashton's best works, including Daffins and Chloe, as part of the tribute season to mark 100 years since his birth. Tickets for the performances, which run up to the 25th of November at the Royal Opera House, start at £4, right up to £50.
Diana Krall is appearing at the Albert Hall, London tonight, and as tickets have been selling fast, there are an extra 2 performances on Saturday and Sunday, so if you like her style of music, there is still time to go and see her.
And finally, artist Colin McCohen has a sale of his prints, an eclectic mix of contemporary images that caused a stir last year when his exhibition was the talk of Broadway, Worcestershire. Well, that's it for this week's programme.
But next week, we will be looking at how subtle lighting techniques can transform flat, uninteresting pictures into works of art to rival Rembrandt and, more recently, Davidson.
And I'll be talking to a world-famous sound engineer about how in the television industry, sound has developed from just those huge and sensitive microphones to all the subtlety and finesse modern sound artists create for productions such as this.
And we will be discovering if our camera crew have remembered anything from their latest tour of duty at Wood Norton when the directors from Television Centre in London tell us how they've coped with our crew members on their return to the big city. Well, we hope you can join us then.
Goodbye.
Bye then.